Happy Monday. It is February 19th, and this is episode 218 of Pencils and Lipstick. I'm Kat Caldwell, and I just finished up my interview with Paula Judith Johnson, and so I thought that I would record the intro right now. Paula is a primarily historical romance writer. She also has two contemporary romance books, which we talk about in the interview. And we also talk about her Writing Romance Mastery Summit, which she holds every 6 months about, so twice a year. And it is going on right now. Now, I'm actually in this summit, though Paula and I think we just met in 2023. It's interesting because we have both been in the industry. She's been in just a few years longer than me, and we didn't know each other until just a few weeks ago. But it was really fun to talk to her about historical romance writing, about romance writing in general. I think that you guys are going to get a lot out of this interview. And I just want to say, we say it in the interview, that you should check out the summit. There are 30 speakers, and so it's a big summit, but there are a lot of different topics going on. Paula does a wonderful job at organizing it and making sure there's not just craft or not just, romance talk, but also publishing and marketing, and being traditionally published or indie published. And she brings in really different people that you probably haven't heard as much from, as well as people who are in the industry and have been in the industry and just have a lot to say about writing and marketing and all of that. Just for the marketing, I think it's pretty worth it. So the links are below. If you are just now finding out about the summit this week, February 19th, I do believe that you have to buy a ticket in at this point. If you are listening to this podcast later on and not in February, you're probably going to have to wait till August when she runs it again. So in order to know when this summit is going to run and how to get access to it, I suggest that you go to Paula's website and sign up um, for her newsletter. There's also a link down there for her Facebook romance writers group. It is not a readers group, it is a writers group. And so if you are a romance writer, or you want to learn about being a romance writer, or you want to write romantic subplots better, this is a Facebook group definitely for the craft of writing romance and love stories. So you won't, she basically says you won't get in unless you are a romance writer. So check that out as well. It's always great when people have resources for writers. I don't know how many of you are romance writers or wanting to be romance writers, but this is going to be the show for you if you are, or if you've been thinking about it. So as far as my historical romance book, we were talking before we started recording, and I told her, I'm 2/3 of the way through, which is, I feel like the worst place to be, because you feel good about where you are, but you're not done yet, and sometimes you forget that you're not done yet. So I actually went back to start editing it till I remembered that I wasn't actually done yet. I need to finish it. So I got a couple thousand words written this week, but in my real life goal at the moment is, I'm obsessed about the Kickstarter, just redoing everything, making sure, everything is tweaked and edited and moving forward. And I actually have BookBrush. If you guys missed episode 216, I talked to Kathleen Sweeney about all the things that BookBrush is offering. And I actually got some hourly concepts from them to make up the graphics for the Kickstarter, which I'm very excited about. And so everything's coming together, and I still have 2 weeks as this podcast goes out to get things really done on that landing page so that people are impressed and just fall in love with the books and want to back the campaign. If you are thinking about backing the campaign, you can go now to the link below and sign up to be notified when it goes live. Um, you can also get on my newsletter, which is, the link is below as well. But if contemporary fiction is your thing, if you like diving deep into characters and their view of the world and their relationships, and wondering if he is going to ever get back to music and get out of the dive world of underground illegal boxing, you are going to want to sign up to be notified when that is coming out. So these books will not be out wide until June. And we have some extras that I'm excited about for the Kickstarter. I know I say this every time, and you might be tired of it, but this is marketing, y'all. This is marketing. So let's get into the interview. It is a bit of a long interview, but there's a lot to talk about, both Paula's books and the summit. So without further ado, here is Paula. All right, welcome back everyone to Pencils and Lipstick. We are here with Paula Judith Johnson. We're going to talk about a couple things, writing romance, most definitely, and her summit. But before we get into all of that, Paula, hello. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, yeah, you put me on the spot there. So I'll tell you about myself. I have been writing romance. I started my first romance in 2007 and actually got it published in 2010. I'm
Good for
self-published,
you. Yeah.
and it took me so long because I had not written creatively for like 35 years.
And
You
because
know?
they don't teach us how to write creatively ever. We just got to figure it out, don't we?
Yeah, but it was a story that had been rattling around in my head for 25 years. And I woke up one morning and I said to myself, if not now, when? And I
Oh, good for
realized
you.
I had to start writing. And I got it, I was still working. So I got out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to have
Oh,
two
wow.
hours to write. Um, and I was about two-thirds of the way through the first draft, which was a really rough draft. And my husband said to me one day, "Why are you getting out of bed so early?" I said, "Because I'm writing a novel." And he said, "What makes you think you can write a novel?" And I said, "I really just don't have any idea. Here, you read what I have, and if it's
Okay.
horrible, let me know and I will quit." And as I said, it was a really rough draft, and it's not like my husband would ever read romance, right? And 2 days later, he came in to my office. I had a home office. And he came into my office and he said, "This is good. Keep writing."
Oh, good.
So that's how I
That's
got
awesome.
started with it. And
That's
yeah,
but did you want like a story you said was in your head, but a story could come out like maybe you want to write a screenplay or write just poetry or it just stays there forever. So did you want to be a writer like when you were younger? Was writing a book something that you
I
always
think
thought about?
I. I've always been fascinated with writing. I mean, one of my favorite subjects in high school was diagramming sentences.
Oh, you're one of those people.
And my grandfather on my dad's side of the family, although I never met him because he died when my dad was a kid, but he was a newspaper reporter.
Okay.
My dad did work. He supervised a typing pool, and they did a lot of, uh, you know, what do they call it? The business books that
Oh,
operating
right.
procedures. That's what I'm
Right,
thinking
right,
of.
right, right.
And my husband was a commercial printer working at a weekly
Oh, cool.
newspaper. So I mean, it was like I was surrounded with it all my
Yeah,
life.
yeah. So there was nothing that like it's almost as though there was no second thought to it. Like I have a story I'm gonna write. You write a book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I mean, I remember in eighth grade, we were supposed to write a book, which was really, I realize now, nothing more than a long short story.
Yeah.
But and that was the year that we had to write a poem, and I think that's when it really I recognized how much
Mhm.
I loved doing that.
Okay.
So
That's
um,
cool.
so it
But
just it
then
it was dormant for a long time, but
right. Well,
it
most
had
of us don't believe or we're told like writing a book, like how do you make a career out of that? It's kind of like you always wonder, like, okay, you might have the idea for Spanx, but like how would you ever do it? Like how are you gonna do this book writing thing? Like you gotta go to college, you gotta get a job, and then there's no time and there's a life to live. So it's
right.
like half the
And
time.
I think that's what happened was, I got married and had a life to live, and
Right.
there it just, it just it dawned on me one day that, I couldn't wait any longer. You
Yeah.
don't know how long you have, and so you got to do it.
Gotta do it now. Well, I'm glad that your husband had that encouragement. It took my husband like 5 years to read my first book. It was already published at that point. I mean,
Well,
he
it's kind of
doesn't.
funny because, as I said, it was a first draft,
Mhm.
not even finished, and there was 5 major revisions after that, and I don't know how many minor revisions. And my editor, I was fortunate to have an editor very early on, and she's like, get rid of this because it doesn't move the story forward. And
Mm,
so when it was finally published, my husband said to me, I dedicated the book to him since he was such a supporter.
yeah.
And he said to me, "So how did it end?" And I said, "If you want to know, you have to read it." And darned if he didn't.
Oh, good for him. That's amazing. I love that. Did you go set about like writing specifically romance? Did you grow up like knowing all these genres? Because I talked to a couple different authors and we're, the 70s, 80s kids were like, you just read whatever was around. I don't know. There was a big thing that said fiction in the library and then like a mystery area. So you just went and picked up a book. So did you know the romance genre? And did you go
Well,
specifically for that?
I was a very eclectic reader,
Hmm.
meaning, in fact, my husband said it doesn't make any difference what you pick up. You will read every word in that book before you put it down, no matter how much you hate it, and that's probably pretty true. But I was a voracious reader,
Okay.
always reading something. But I was always drawn to romance,
Okay.
and although I read my share of mysteries and thrillers and I mean, John Grisham, John D. McDonald, I love those too. But uh, I think predominantly I read romance, and I didn't realize when I started to write. I mean, I had no clue about structure or what reader expectations were or anything like that. It's just I'm writing what I like to read. In fact, that's kind
Right.
of what spurred me on, was that I was tired of reading books that didn't do it for me.
Yeah. No, weren't satisfied. And they get
I
into a
could write
lull.
better than that.
Yeah.
Uh, so it wasn't until I actually started studying the whole concept of writing novels that I realized I must have picked up a lot of the stuff that needs to be there by osmosis or something from
Right.
just having read so many things in my life. Because although I think I have improved, the truth of the matter is I was good.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Excuse
think
me. I did not know I was good. That first book was published 10 years before I was brave enough to submit it to a contest. And I was a finalist in the historic romance category in
oh,
2020. And the sequel I submitted the next year and was again a finalist. So
that's
and
amazing.
I only recently found out that being a finalist does in fact make me an award-winning author. I didn't have any clue.
Yay. Now you can put that up there. That's very cool. But that's a big deal. I mean, there's something about authors, even if our book is out there, that you're just like, oh, I don't know if I really want. Like, even if you could have all the great reviews, kind of these days between I mean, on Goodreads, you don't even know. I feel like Goodreads just bombs books these days, but between a 4 and 5 on Amazon, because there are people who love to give terrible reviews too. You're like, okay, people like my book, but to submit it to a contest takes some deep breath, right? Because they'll come back with scathing, report or just like, oh no, or they won't even answer you. And you'll be like, okay, I guess I didn't make it.
Well, then your listeners will probably like to know that in the current Writing Romance Mastery Summit, which starts on February 19th,
Hmm.
that I interviewed Hannah Jacobson, the CEO of
Oh,
Pro Book Awards,
nice.
Book Awards Pro, excuse me, Book Awards Pro. And she tells me that there are thousands of book awards that you can
Really?
apply to. Yeah. So,
Nice. We're gonna have to listen to that one. Um, well, let's talk about the summit now, if you want to, because you not only are a writer, but you also help romance writers. So you have this like intuitive um, thoughts on how to write your story, but you've also studied story structure. And now you have the Writing Romance Mastery Summit twice a year. So how did you get started in helping other writers?
well, here it goes back to confidence. I just, although I have mentored writers through the Romance Writers of America RAMP program, I did not feel that I um, was really cut out to be a coach.
Hmm.
And I've taken editing courses, so I've learned really early on I don't like to edit.
Yes.
Other people's work. I
God
really don't.
bless those editors, though.
And but I do like helping people. I don't want other authors to go through the struggles I went through when I
Okay.
started out.
Okay.
And through a long, winding road, I had an opportunity to take a 6-week course on how to do virtual summits. And I thought, that's probably something I will never do, but I will take the course, perpetual
At
student.
least you finished the course. Many of us buy a course and then we never even open it. So
Well, on the third week of the 6-week course, the assignment was to start inviting speakers to.
oh,
I'm going, I emailed the teacher and I said, "Am I supposed to actually invite people?" He never even answered me back.
he's like, "Why are you in this course?" Well, good for him though for like pushing everyone basically to work and to put forth like
Right. So by the end of the course, I actually he did refer 3 people to me, 2 of which said that yes, their list would be interested in this, and the third person wrote children's novels. It's like, well, that wouldn't work
like
at all.
that's not gonna work.
No, so anyway, I started doing it, and I mean, through the course, I was like, I don't know nothing about interviewing people, and he's like, well, here's a script, and so it's like, oh, and I've had people say, you are such a great interviewer.
Script.
It's a good thing I have this cheat sheet here because I don't know what I'm doing, but um, I have the summit has been received so well from
Hmm.
authors. I've received so many great comments from people about the great content that we have on there, and I that's what I always look for is how can I make it better and better and better. So
Yeah.
the
So
one
how
in
long have you been
February.
doing it for?
Well, this will be my third one. I did
Okay.
2 last year, and I will be doing 2 this year, and I
Okay.
plan on doing 2 forever.
Every
Um,
year.
and we cover the craft of writing. We cover publication, both indie and traditional, and we cover marketing, both paid and organic. So,
Yeah.
uh, you
That's what
know,
I love about your summit is that you really do have an organization to it. And every day you have a reason for each speaker there, right? And you have a variety of speakers too. And I've been in this indie author business since 2017, and you have new people that don't know, which I love. So I found quite a few new people in August and was like, this is amazing. Especially like you always kind of want to see what other people have for craft and marketing. And this time around, you have even different people. Yeah, and I'm like,
I
I'm always
even have
amazed.
you, Kat.
You have me. um, and I love that. I love how you like. I don't know where you find everyone, but you're
Well,
definitely not hearing from the same people.
yeah, well, okay. For every speaker that I have, I ask them who else would be really good for this kind of a summit. I'm sure I must have
A
asked you,
good
Kat,
question.
and
Probably.
and I
I don't
get
remember.
referrals that way. And then,
Yeah.
of course, I do have some repeat people, but always with new topics.
Right.
You know,
Right. Right.
I've had Well, this will be the third time that Derek Depker's on, but he talked last time. I think it was audiobooks. The time before that was email marketing, and this time he's talking about getting reviews to help sell books.
Right.
And I've
Right.
had Alexa Bigworth. This time she's talking about overcoming the fear of marketing, but and I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember the other two topics, but they're not the same topics. So,
Right. There are
that's
some names in the industry that have a lot to say. And
yeah.
it's always interesting to hear from them for sure. So this summit though is mostly for people who write romance.
Yes, although I have heard from people who don't write romance. In fact, it's always funny. I know immediately because the emails will always start out. I have no intention of ever writing romance. I have never written romance. However, I loved your summit because it has so much information that applies
Yeah,
to any genre.
of
That's a
course.
a
Yeah.
typical email that I will get from, and they're usually men.
Well, just before we were recording, I was telling you about a thriller book that had, some spicy scenes in it a long time ago when I must have well, I hate to say it, it's like 17 years ago when I read it and I was like, "Oh my goodness, there are other books that have spicy scenes other than romance." But like romance, it definitely is a genre, but you can also have romance subplots and, you know, you might need some tips on like how to write that tension, between the people. Especially if you're a man, you might need like maybe not all men, but maybe some.
Yeah. Well, and that's very true. I mean, it's hard to find a movie or a genre of fiction today that doesn't have some type of romance in it. And
Right.
I think the reason for that is because romance is based on human beings' relationships, and people are fascinated with relationships.
Right.
That is what makes a person care about a character, is this
Yes.
relationship. And so, yeah, the romantic subplot is very definitely there.
Yeah.
And you reminded me of something. I do have a course out, and in that course, one lesson is completely devoted to dialogue, the differences between men and women and how they talk.
Oh.
Because if you're a woman writing romance, you don't want your hero to sound like your best girlfriend.
Yeah.
And if you're a man writing a romantic subplot or romance, you don't want your women sounding like your best buddy that you're going to go out and have a beer after the ball game.
That would be a little weird. I mean, I guess you could have a certain character, but yeah, there's definitely a couple of different stereotypes you don't want to fall into because it will be so weird.
Well, men and women talk differently.
Yes.
We have, whether we know it or not, it is
Yes.
ingrained in our DNA that, you know, men talk to get information.
Mhm.
Women talk to clarify feelings.
Yes. Yes. And dialogue is really important because the majority of the what does Jeff Elkins say? The bestsellers have like a majority of dialogue in their books. Like we think that the prose is important, which it is, and everything has its place, but we love dialogue. I mean, I remember being a kid and like, when's the dialogue coming again? Like you have to read it, especially when it's like assigned for school. Um, but you get to hear the characters and you like it's just like a quicker into their thoughts and soul, right? And so if they all sound the same or if they sound opposite than what they're supposed to, you
Yeah,
know that as a reader right away. Like,
exactly. In fact, just recently, I did not finish a book that I had been looking forward to reading because um, there was so much, I guess, dissertation is what I would call it, and very little dialogue.
yeah,
I mean, I would go for 2 or 3 pages with the author telling me what was happening and then a little bit of dialogue. And it's like, wow, that scene right there should have been all dialogue. And
right.
yeah, so you bring out a very good point there, Kat.
Yeah, you don't feel like you're in there with the character, right? I signed up for this critique group and then I immediately left because the book that I got had 101 pages with no dialogue.
Oh my.
And I was like, okay, I don't even know where to begin. And so I started writing up a nice letter of like, hey, the story's interesting, but it's just like telling me really far away, like it almost felt like 100-page summary. And then I went on Amazon and saw that it had 4 stars, it like 54-star reviews, and I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't know.
That's really funny. And I have Janice Hardy is in this summit talking about show don't tell.
Yeah.
So, and that's
And that dialogue
that's
helps with that for
it
sure.
helps
Like,
tremendously. Getting rid of all the past perfect tenses, or as many as you can, helps with that too. So,
yeah,
no
absolutely.
has-beens and have-beens.
No. Oh my
We
gosh.
want ises and wases.
So when you had that first book, and you were working with your editor, was that the kind of your first entryway into like working, like redrafting and story structure and sort of, formal education, I guess I would say, into
Yeah.
what all that entails?
Yes. It was interesting. I met her at a writing class that we took together, and
Okay.
she had completely edited my first novel chapter by chapter as I was writing them,
Oh wow.
um, before I even knew that she was a professional editor.
Oh wow, that's lucky.
Yeah, and um, yeah, I learned a lot from her, and I still use her, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact. Um, but yeah, I remember one scene that I absolutely loved. As I said, it was a historical novel, and one scene I absolutely loved. Was just a juicy piece of history that just fascinated me. And she asked me, "Why do you have this scene in here? How does it move the story forward?" And I said, "Well, I don't think it moves the story forward, but it's fascinating." She says, "Get rid of it."
That's
And
hard.
to this day, I don't even know what I can't remember.
What the history is? I mean, but that's hard to hear as like, were you open to that as a first time writer? You were just open to her saying
So,
that and
yeah,
you
well,
following?
yeah, as I said, I met her in a writing class, and it was a class where we were sharing things, and so I had already built up a respect for her talent as a
Mm,
writer, and so
yeah,
I was open. If that had been one of my older brothers, I would have told him to go jump in a lake.
right. It definitely did. Yeah, our responses have a lot to do with the relationships we have with people, right? Well, I love that you had that really good experience with an editor and with a writing group. I think that makes a difference. Did you end up traditionally publishing or indie publishing?
I indie published, and part of that is because at the time I lacked confidence.
Mm,
And also because I'm rather impatient. It's like I got to the end. We did our revisions. I got to the end. We did our revisions. I got to the end. I was ready to publish.
yeah, I'm ready to go. So in 2010, you're kind of one of the first people that, in that first wave of people that indie published then. I mean, I know other people self-published before them, but that's about when it was starting to bigger names were doing it. And so people didn't look down their nose at you as much. They were still looking down their noses at us, but like it wasn't as
Yeah. I mean, when I say that I lacked confidence, very definitely that lingered for a while because
mm,
there was always the thing in my mind, am I really an author because I self-published?
yeah, that was the thing. Yeah.
Am I faking it?
Yeah, yeah. Even with the Kindle and everything, I mean, lots of people, and it's funny because I remember reading traditionally published authors at the time when I got my first Kindle, and I don't see them around anymore, but I do see indie authors who were independently publishing at the time still around. I don't know what that correlates to, but it's just an interesting little observation.
Yeah.
Um, but then after, so you're mostly historical romance. What era? Do you stick to one era?
Yes, I am fascinated by the era leading up to and following, immediately following the War of 1812.
Okay.
So, my first novel, which did not come out anything at all like I thought it was going to,
Never
um,
does.
because I didn't know about outlining or anything like that. I remember hating outlining in school, so there was no way I was going to outline. But as the characters developed and they had a mind of their own, so uh, it didn't turn out the way I had originally envisioned it, but I think it was very good. But I had an American sea captain and an English uh, daughter of an earl. And
Okay.
that's what the romance is about. And so it's the years leading up to the War of 1812 to just after the beginning of the war. And, there was a lot of on again, off again embargoes at that time. Um, Thomas Jefferson almost bankrupted the northeastern states because they were merchant states. And
Right.
when my character wanted to go to England to see his lady love, it was like, too bad, there's an embargo, you can't go. Well, I
Oh
have
my
to go.
gosh.
Okay, well, you have to figure out how you're going to go. And he figured out how he could get there, which is a good thing. But uh, that's just an era that fascinates me. And so the last one I wrote is based all in the United States, where
Okay.
Sweetbriar was half in England, half in the United States. Um, but this one is all in the United States, and the one I'm working right now is all in the United States. So, yeah, it's just
That's
a
really
fascinating
cool.
time.
Because that era is fascinating, just the cultural things that were happening at that time. And
Yeah,
but a lot of romance that I've read, historical romance, is all set in England. And so I really find that interesting that you're setting it, in America, and because the cultures actually, like, lots of things were really starting to veer off, right? Like, the Americans were acting in a different way than the English at that point. Like, it
right.
wasn't that far from the Revolutionary War, but already our cultures were going, right, like,
Yeah, well,
we
it's
are
about
not gonna be
25
like you.
years, and it was our second war of independence from England, very
Yeah.
definitely. But yes, you're right about most of the historical romances that are set in that era are the Regency romances in
Mhm.
England. So I can't really call myself a Regency, not with the second two, but with the first one, it was kind of sort of. But yeah, it's a different take on it. But you know, there's a whole mindset that I think that sometimes is missing when people are writing about the era. You have to remember there was obviously no telephones, no television, no telegraphs, no trains. If a
Right.
person needed to get someplace in a hurry, it was either horseback or carriage. And there's a whole different mindset in pre-industrialized in the whole pre-industrialized world. So, and because of some of my previous interests, I can kind of spot things in novels sometimes where a little bit more research would have helped. My husband and I, for 25 years, were members of a black powder shooting club. The
Oh, wow.
muzzleloader,
Yeah.
not flintlocks. Although I have shot flintlocks, we shot more of the cap locks, but it was a mountain man club. So
Yeah.
we're talking about 1750 to 1850 approximately. The
Okay.
mountain man heyday was about 1800 to 1840.
Okay.
So, I learned a lot about not only the firearms, but, I've won prizes for throwing knife and talk, knife
Oh,
and
that's so
talk.
cool.
And, you know, making the clothes from the time, actually
Yeah.
wearing them and knowing, ugh, you could do this and you couldn't do that. I mean, why did women have other women dressing them? It's
Yeah.
because they had itty bitty little tiny buttons in the back where you couldn't reach,
Yeah. Yeah.
things of that nature. And there's just having pseudo lived in that era
Right.
has given me some insights to the time period.
Yes. Yes. I don't think there's anything worse than being someone who loves history and loves historical fiction, historical romance, and reading a book that you go, that's not right. Like, whether they don't talk the way, or they have technology that they shouldn't yet, and there's no excuse for it because we have Google. Like, there's really, like, you can find out, were there trains in 1812? No. Okay, when did trains come about? Okay, I either need to move my novel or give them something else.
And that's true because, in my first novel, I wanted to describe the colorfulness of the gowns in a ballroom.
Mm,
And of course, the first thing I thought about was the kaleidoscope of colors. And then I thought, what year was the kaleidoscope invented?
yeah, yeah,
Was
it's
that
so
even a
true.
word they had then?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And what colors were mass produced? What colors were easier? What colors meant that you had a lot of money? Like, these little
and the
details add.
fabrics,
Yeah,
and the fabrics too, because I mean they're, yeah,
yeah.
the
Before the
type of
Silk
stitching.
Road, no one had silk. That drives me insane.
Yeah. Well, you know, um, this is before the treadle sewing machine. These clothes were sewn by hand, and
Yeah.
the whole idea about, oh, you're going to go down to the dressmaker and you're going to be fitted for a dress and you're going to walk out with a new wardrobe. you know,
No,
I mean,
no.
it took a while.
Yeah,
It, it
I mean, at that time, you make it a fantasy historical book if you want.
yeah, yeah. It actually fascinates me, how, the yards and yards and yards of fabric that went into these clothes when they all had to be stitched by hand.
I know.
And now
Yeah.
we have all the convenience of sewing machines and just going to the store or whatever, and our clothes get skimpier and skimpier.
Yeah, they're like a little square. Yeah, I mean, after the war, when I lived in France, I knew several people whose parents were like the ready to wear clothes makers. So they had the sewing machines, but like it was ready to wear because it was done in like 2 days instead of 2 weeks, like, because they take their clothes very seriously in France.
Yeah,
And well, it's just, well, we could go on to history, but that I find it fascinating. But let's get so most of your historical books, or all of your historical books, are around 1812, either before, during, or after, but you don't call them Regency because romance readers get a little finicky, right? About
yeah. Regency has to do with the regent who
yeah,
was, ruling in England, and but
England.
regardless of what a past president has said, our presidents do not rule; they govern.
Yeah, yes. We hope. We hope it stays that way. But then you have dabbled in contemporary romance. Is that something that you plan on continuing?
No.
No.
It was an accident. I have two contemporary romances, and how do you write two novels of about 90,000 words by accident?
It just had to come out. I mean, that's what's weird about writing. We're like
Well,
painters.
after I finished my first novel, I mean, it really is scary when you finish your first novel and the first thing that hits your head is, "Oh my gosh, do I have another story to tell?"
Yeah,
You know?
true.
And I I thought I would start another historical novel, and it was just going nowhere. And so I decided, it was a practice that I had at that time, that first thing in the morning as I was, uh, sipping my first cup of tea, I would take 10 minutes and just free write.
Okay.
I had awakened with the tail end of a dream of a man and a woman sitting on a bench next to a swimming pool. And I used that as my prompt.
Yeah.
And I wrote for 10 minutes and put it away, didn't think anything of it. And this one morning, I was really stuck. I had no clue what I was going to write about anything. And so I pulled out this whole stack of writing prompts and I started reading them. And I got to this one. It ended in the middle of a sentence. And my first thought was, but what happens next? And then my second thought was, oh, darn, if I want to know, I have to write it. and I think that scene is on page 85 or something like that of the physical book.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, that's going to be a standalone. And I heard from so many readers, but what happened to these other two characters? And I thought, well, you can't write a sequel unless you have certain things in there. So I reread Starting Over, and it's like, oh my gosh, I have everything that I need there for a sequel. So
Okay.
then I wrote the sequel, and that is entitled
But
just,
that's the end.
yeah,
You're
that's the
not
end.
gonna write one.
That's not anymore. And uh, I just don't feel. I was married for 45 years before my husband passed away. I have been out of the dating scene for so long. It's
Yes.
like I don't feel qualified to write contemporary.
You know what? I find it quite boring because, well, boring slash difficult because miscommunication, like there's no excuse for it. Like there's no missive gone missing or, little message not, blown away in the wind. Like we wear watches that notify us when someone's, texting. So it's a lot more like you have to be much more creative in how you're going to structure a romance and how, the tension that they're going to have. And so I don't play like as a writer, I'm just like, yeah, but I could just at least set it in the 80s. Like I could at least like there's just something a little more romantic about the past. And I don't know. It's one of my favorites to sort of read the past. I feel like you can play a lot more with different elements.
I think
Some
you
people
can.
write contemporary great, right? But it's just not for us, I guess. So do you have the summit this week? So as people are listening, this is the summit, and we'll have the links below for everyone to sign up for it. As we said, it's for romance writers or romantic subplot writers, but also like no, now that we've talked about it, it has marketing. Like if you want to market your book, you should probably come to the summit because you have a lot of marketing people
A lot of
um
marketing, and we have one full day of publishing, both
in
Indian
publishing.
and
Yeah.
uh, traditional.
Yes, even if
That
you're a
are
thriller
the thing.
writer, that will
Yeah.
definitely be worth it. But after that, do you have a book that has just come out or a book coming out?
I'm in the middle of writing it again. I took about a 1 year hiatus from writing, mainly because I was starting summits, and that
Yes.
took a lot of brain power. But I'm back into writing now, but I'm not going to have another book out for probably. I hope to get the discovery draft done this year,
Okay.
and probably come out next year.
All right, perfect. I like that you give yourself time to write. We tend in the indie author world to hear a lot about people like trying to do all the things all the time, which I can't do. And so I love it when other people are like, no, I'm not
No,
going to do all the things all the time. I'm going to sleep,
yeah,
a
yeah,
few
that's
hours.
amazing. How sharp we can be when we wake up with 8 hours of sleep.
Yes, I love it, and which we need, right? So everyone click on the Writing Romance Mastery Summit links below, but I would also encourage you to go to paulajudithjohnson.com. We'll have that link below and people can sign up for your newsletter, right?
That's right.
And is there anywhere else that you would like them to go find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and if your listeners are a romance writer or they write romantic elements or they intend to become a romance writer very shortly, I have a Facebook group, the Romance Dreamweavers. It is for romance authors only, meaning we don't have that. Okay, a lot of us romance people do more than one thing. But
Right.
if a person is only an editor and they're nothing else, they don't get in the
Yeah.
group. You know,
Yeah.
if they are a romance writer and they edit, then they get in the group, that kind of thing.
That
But
makes sense. That makes sense
I
because it
didn't
goes
want to,
all around writing romance.
right. I didn't want a group that got so bogged down with all the peripheral stuff that we didn't have any
Yeah.
romance writers in there. So, that group is about 1,200 people now. I'm on LinkedIn and recently started an Instagram account.
All right. So we'll have all those links below and people can find your books, are you wide or are you just on Amazon?
Well, I'm on Amazon, but I'm also wide. So, if they have an iPad, they can go to iTunes and get it. It's in Barnes and Noble and all those. I don't know. There's like 14, 15
All
different
the I
places.
know. I know every time you go find it, you're like, "Oh, look, my book's there." I don't know. Anyway, well, thank
Yeah.
you so much, Paula, for coming on and talking to me today.
Well, thank you so much, Kat.